All right, welcome to our second session of Basecamp Briefings powered by Summit Strategy, your go-to webinar series for cutting through the noise in GovCon with actionable strategies to help you win more, bid smarter, and stay ahead of the competition. All right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. The federal market has been a little weird lately. There's a lot of delays, a lot of cancellations, a lot of shifting priorities, just a lot of everything. But here's the thing, federal is not the only game in town. So if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling slowed down in federal, SLED might be your fastest path to revenue right now. It's not just a backup plan, it is a legit growth strategy if you know how to approach it right. So today we're digging into how to actually win in SLED without spinning your wheels and without chasing RFPs that you've got no shot at. A special thanks to our data partner, HireGov, who we use for market research, intel, solicitation data, and more. HireGov provides comprehensive visibility into opportunities across all 50 states, including detailed procurement data from over 40,000 state, county, municipal, education, public utility, and other agencies. Their tool greatly simplifies the process of discovering SLED opportunities. My name is Kristen Maycumber. I'm the founder and CEO of Summit Strategy. I've spent my entire career helping government contractors and professional services firms win more, bid smarter, and position themselves for long-term success. I've worked across both federal and SLED markets, and I've bounced between the two more than I can count in the last 22 years. So I really get the nuances, the differences, and the opportunity that each one brings. And then at Summit, we help growth minded firms show up stronger in the market, whether it's through smarter business development, clearer messaging, better proposals, and more strategic pursuit processes. So whether you're chasing city contracts or federal GWACs, we help you compete and win. All right, so here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to do a deep dive into the SLED overview. We're going to talk about the differences between state level, city level, county level, education level opportunities. We're going to talk about SLED and Fed differences and similarities. I'll give a little preview about some hot SLED markets that I'm keeping an eye on. And then we'll just talk about how to be sales ready from your assets to your process, as well as the interview orals piece that is really popular in SLED. All right, so first up, let's dive into the overview of the SLED market. So what exactly is SLED? Obviously, SLED stands for state, local, and education. And again, it's a massive, often overlooked part of the public sector market. So we're talking about a $2 trillion addressable market with over 100,000 plus government entities, whether that's cities, counties, school districts, universities, transit authorities, you name it. It's fragmented, it's fast moving, and if you know how to navigate it, it can be a serious growth channel, especially when federal side slows down like right now. So why are we talking about SLED right now? Obviously, the federal market has been shaky. There's a lot of delays, contract cancellations, procurements are on pause. It's really unpredictable right now, and SLED is still spending. So budgets are active, decisions are being made. The procurement cycle is often faster and more straightforward. And of course, it's time to diversify. I always say the best time to diversify was last year. The second best time is right now. So SLED is going to give you a broader playing field to grow, especially when the federal market feels a little stuck. So let's look at some data. Since the new administration took office, we have seen a clear drop in the number of new federal procurement opportunities, especially in non-defense civilian sectors. So the shift in policy priorities is real, and it's shown here in the data. And it's really reshaping the federal landscape right now that obviously directly impacts your pipeline. And the data doesn't lie. Like look at solicitation volume, taking a nosedive earlier this year in January and February. Yes, there was a rebound in March, but overall activity is still lagging compared to last year. And then in some markets like consulting, volumes are well below prior years. So this is for the consulting NAICS code. So if you're waiting for things to go back to normal, you're already behind. We're also seeing the clear trend right now that the federal government is trying to offload more responsibility to the states. So obviously there's a bill on the table to break FEMA out of DHS, make it a standalone cabinet level agency. But what's more important is the push behind it, which is to shift more disaster preparedness and response down to the state level. And it's not just FEMA. Look at the administration and how they've moved to dismantle the Department of Education, again, aiming to hand over more power to states and local systems, local school systems. So if your firm only has a Fed first mindset, you're going to miss this pivot. There's more money, more decisions, and more opportunity that are being pushed down to SLED. And it's really the time now to pay attention. So we're going to keep it real throughout this presentation, and we'll have these reality check slides to call out the stuff that really matters. So here's our first one. Just because you're selling to a state or a local agency doesn't mean the funding starts there. A lot of SLED projects are still federally funded, especially in areas like infrastructure, disaster recovery, which we just looked at, public safety, education. So if you want to win, you have to follow the money trail. Where's the funding coming from? Who's controlling it? Who's distributing it? That intel is really going to shape how you position, price, and pursue that work. So let's break down SLED and see who buys and what they buy. So obviously there's state governments, they're going to be the biggest spenders. They're going to have big contracts but longer timelines. We've got cities and counties that are going to be local government and they're going to move faster, which is good for quick wins. There's going to be special districts like water, energy, healthcare, transit districts. Those are perfect for niche solutions. K through 12 school districts are major spenders on construction, tech, food, safety, transport, and then there's the public colleges and universities. So those are going to have big budgets. They're going to be great for firms that offer things like IT, facilities, research, or consulting. So let's break it down even more. I'm going to talk through state, city, county, and education specifically. All right, so if you want to go big in the SLED market, this is where the serious money is. So state level contracts are going to they're going to be high budget, high visibility, and often tied to major infrastructure, public health, tech modernization, and education initiatives. So you're looking at work from agencies like the Department of Transportation, Health and Human Services, IT departments, departments of education, and they're going to be looking for things like highway support, roadway support, engineering and design, Medicaid systems, cybersecurity, e-learning platforms, and more. And these are going to be best suited for firms that can really handle complex statewide delivery, either on their own or as part of a strong team. So that's something to consider. So here's what makes state level work a different beast. You're not just going to build a website for one department, you're going to roll it out across an entire state agency. You're not just going to install chargers in one city, you're going to bid on a contract to manage EV infrastructure statewide. So these projects are going to be bigger, longer, and more complex. And because most states are going to use a centralized procurement system, once you're in the door, you do have a broader reach and sometimes a more repeatable path to revenue. So if you're used to chasing smaller, like one-off local projects and you're looking to level up, state level contracts are a great way to do that. But you have to be ready for the scale and the scrutiny that comes with that. All right, so let's be honest, breaking into state level work is going to be hard. Most of the real work is already flowing through on call contracts or pre approved vendor lists. So if you're not already on that list, you're not getting the opportunity. So your job is to figure out who holds those contracts. Can you sub on existing teams? When are those contracts up for renewal and build those into your pipeline? So if you're breaking into SLED cold, this is going to be one of the biggest hurdles to watch for. So what does it take to win a state level contract? First, you got to get yourself on one of those term contracts. That's really going to be your entry ticket. No term contract, no work. You need to understand how your services tie into the state budgeting process. So if it's not funded, it's not happening. So again, you got to follow that money trail. States are going to want to know that you can deliver at scale, not just run a great pilot. So you're going to think multi-site, multi-year, multi-stakeholder. And then finally, you need to tailor the hell out of your proposal, which is really applicable to all of SLED. You need to talk like the state talks, reference their plans, their priorities, their pain points. You can't just copy paste from your federal proposals and think that's going to win. All right, county level work is where local needs meet real funding. So you're not going to be building statewide systems, you're going to be solving urgent on the ground problems in specific regions. So think things like healthcare delivery, 911 upgrades, pandemic response, which was obviously a huge thing a couple years ago, road repair, stuff that impacts people's daily lives. So these contracts are going to be great for businesses that can plug into local infrastructure work closely with public agencies, and deliver services in things like health, safety, or utilities that really can't afford to fail. County level work is going to be a mixed bag, though, and you got to be ready for that. So, some counties are going to be pretty centralized with dedicated procurement teams, structured processes, others, not so much. So, procurement can be all over the place. It could be manual, messy, non existent online. This is where a lot of like printed hard copy proposals have to be submitted. It can be very outdated. But what's consistent is the focus on public services. So again, healthcare, social programs, infrastructure. These are contracts where you're directly improving the quality of life in a community, but it takes time to build those relationships and figure out how each county is going to buy. So if you want to win at that local level, you better show up where decisions are getting made. And that's not going to be in the formal RFP. This is going to be a relationship game. So that means the Board of Supervisors meetings, town halls, budget hearings, and even community events. Local leaders are really going to want to work with people who understand their region and understand it intimately. Winning at the county level means you better be known and trusted in that community. So that starts with building those relationships again with department heads. Here in this level, department heads are the ones that are going to influence spending decisions. So that's where relationships need to be focused. When you do submit a proposal, again, make sure it's not generic. You're going to have to tie your value directly to what that county cares about, whether it's economic development, workforce readiness, or public health. When it comes to city contracts, it's all about, again, local services, but even faster turnarounds. So this is where smaller firms can really shine. You might be doing IT upgrades for City Hall or maintaining parks and rec facilities or supporting workforce development and downtown revitalization efforts. So if you're a small to mid-sized business, this is usually the easiest entry point into public sector work and into SLED in particular. Procurement's going to move quickly, sometimes within weeks, and awards are often made based on who's visible, responsive, and trusted. This is going to be a great space for niche providers who solve, again, hyper local problems. So think things like ADA compliance upgrades, local IT support, workforce training, even things like event logistics. This is going to be important at the city level. So, reality check here. If you're not building relationships with city council members, the mayor, or their staff, you're missing where the real decisions are getting made. So, procurement might issue that RFP, but influence is going to happen way before that. I used to work at a company that had lobbyists where their job was solely to build relationships with city council members and influence future buying decisions. So just keep in mind if you're trying to break into the city level, and you don't have relationships with city council or you don't have a big budget for lobbyists, you're going to be going up against firms that do. So just keep that in mind as part of your strategy. So city work is all about speed, relationships, and relevance. If you want to win, you got to be known by the people that are making those decisions. Again, that's elected officials, department heads, program staff. All right, education is one of the most diverse and decentralized parts of SLED. So you're not just going to sell to school districts, you've also got state departments, you've got K through 12 systems, public universities, education service centers that all are going to buy in different ways. It's a great space for businesses offering things like IT, safety, facilities, workforce training, student services. But again, you have to understand who's holding the budget and how decisions get made across each level. Every district, college, and agency is going to buy differently. This is part of the complex nature of SLED and the fun web to untangle. The funding is going to come from a dozen different places, whether it's the state budget, federal grants, sometimes bond measures. And the procurement process is going to be anything but consistent. But the upside is that the demand never stops. They always need tech upgrades. They always need safety improvements, workforce training. They're always looking for partners that really get it and can deliver fast. Education contracts are tied to budget cycles, grants, and bonds, not just the open RFPs. So if you're not tracking how that money flows, and where it comes from, you're really going to be missing those buying signals. So again, do your research on the funding. So above all here, to win an education contract, you're going to have to tie your value directly to student outcomes or community impact. That's really going to be what is moving the needle in this space. You might also hear the term municipal. So when we say municipal or muni, we're really talking about city governments, counties, special districts, think like water districts, fire districts, transit authorities. So this is really the L in SLED. And while each, again, one may have a smaller budget than a state agency, they sometimes represent the highest value and volume of contracts by far. So if you're trying to figure out where to start in SLED, this slide here gives you a quick snapshot. So again, state contracts are going to have the biggest budgets, but they're going to move the slowest. Counties and education are kind of the middle ground where there's steady money, there's decent speed. And then cities are going to be faster to contract, easier to access, but sometimes smaller dollar values. So the bottom line here is you're going to need to choose your entry point based on your capacity, based on your patience, and really relationships. There's not going to be a one size fits all path, but this will help kind of give you some intel on how to pick the best one that fits you. All right, so let's talk about what really sets SLED apart from federal. Because again, if you're used to chasing federal work and you bring that same mindset to SLED, you're really going to hit a wall and you're not going to be successful. The process, the players, the timeline, the buying behaviors, they're all really different than federal. So I wanted to break down those key differences. I know this is a lot here, and you can take this slide and study it later, but overall, like federal is going to have a slow, formal, it's going to be process heavy. SLED is going to be a lot faster, but it's going to be messier and it's going to be way more relationship driven. And again, there's nuances in the proposal requirements in how you actually what the entry points look like, which we'll go through here in a second. But again, you can't treat these the same. You can't treat federal and SLED and just copy your federal approach into SLED because you're not going to be successful. So you got to learn the game and then you got to play it right. All right, so another reality check here. Unlike federal, there's no sam.gov for SLED. Procurement portals are going to be a pain in the you know what. So you've got to track down opportunities across thousands of portals. In California, in a previous role before I left corporate to start my own business, I managed a spreadsheet that had over 200 logins in California for state agencies, for local level, city level, because every city, county, state had their own procurement portal, and I had to keep track of all of our password and login information. It was a pain in the you know what. It's going to be clunky, it's going to be inconsistent, and procurement portals are going to be a huge time suck. So if you're serious about SLED, you need to get an aggregator tool like our partner HireGov, or be ready to dedicate someone solely to portal purgatory, which that is a terrible job to have. And do note that even if you do use an aggregator like HireGov or others, you might still have to create an account on the local portal to access all the RFP docs. I know a lot of cities and counties and entities here in California use Planet Bids, and there's no universal login to Planet Bids. Every city and county has their own kind of subdirectory within Planet Bids. And so even though an opportunity shows up in HireGov, you still might have to create an account on Planet Bids to download the documents, which again is another paperwork nightmare. So if you do have this, if you do explore SLED, build a spreadsheet, track all your logins. That's the only way to keep track of all this. So if you're certified at the federal level, so obviously certifications like woman-owned, veteran-owned, 8A, that's great, but state and local agencies are going to have their own certification programs. Just like federal, though, they're going to help you get in the door. So whether it's SWAM in Virginia, LBE in California, or MeeBee in New York, these certifications are going to help open doors to set aside. You're going to get preference points in the RFP scoring system. They're going to have more teaming opportunities because of these. So really look into your target client in SLED and see what their certification requirements are and make sure you get certified locally too. And I want to hit on the local business enterprise for for a second, because a lot of folks think that they can just check the box and call it a day. Oh, we've got a person there local. But cities and counties are really cracking down on this. So LA County, for example, so I'm in California in Orange County, but a little bit north in LA County. To qualify as a local business enterprise, you can't just have a PO box or one person in LA County. You have to prove that at least 50% of your full-time employees within the whole company work within the county boundaries, or that your company is headquartered in the county. They're going to want to work with true local businesses, and you're going to have to provide paperwork in your proposal and to become certified that proves this. There's a lot of RFPs that say you'll get 5 points if you're 5 point preference if you're local. And so if you're not and you can't meet those certification requirements, you're going to miss out automatically on 5 points as part of the evaluation process. So really study this hard for your target agencies and figure out where and how you can get certified and start that paperwork now, because you're not going to be able to submit on RFPs until you do. So when I'm writing a proposal and I know that we're up against a company who is flying in to win the work versus being based locally, you better believe that I am ghosting them in my proposal. So I've spent my whole career, having win strategy sessions, talking about our competitors and knowing that we're up against a firm that is headquartered elsewhere, trying to win work locally. They have one or two people, and that's a great way to sell a win theme and write a win theme for a company that is local. That's easy to tell that story. So you're going to be up against firms that are deeply ingrained in the local community. And if you're not yet, then you're going to miss out on those potential points and win themes. All right. Good faith effort. So this is a process that requires documentation, basically to show that you genuinely tried to engage, whether it's certified small, local, minority, or woman-owned businesses, depending on what the requirements are, even if they don't end up being on your final team. So to be real, like, I absolutely believe in the spirit of good faith effort requirements. I think that local and diverse participation absolutely matters, and we should require that. But the reality is that this is an often like a huge fire drill of paperwork that's going to be due in the 2-week proposal sprint. And you're still in the process of writing the actual proposal, and you have to stop and do all this paperwork as well. It's important, but it's a grind. So if you're not ready and you see good faith effort and you don't have a process for this, you're gonna not be compliant before you even submit that proposal. So, what exactly is good faith effort and why should it make you cry? So, there's requirements for things like you have to advertise in a newspaper or a local publication that you're pursuing a project and that you have an opportunity for small and diverse businesses to be subs. And let's be honest, if you're a proposal writer, you don't really know how to find, contact the person, contact the publication, develop an ad. So, you better have a marketing or comms team that can help. You also sometimes have to host an outreach event, often in person, to tell potential subs about the project, what scopes of work you're looking to sub out. Then you have to create a log of who attended that event, what their certifications are, if they're interested in being on your team, if you decide to put them on your team or not. Again, it's a lot of work in a very short period of time. So just be prepared if you see this as a requirement to get that jump started right away the second you decide to say yes to an opportunity. Another reality check here. So, state and local proposals are not going to be private. So, unlike federal contracts, most SLED agencies can make everything public. So, that means your pricing, the scoring, even full proposals. So, this means that competitors can basically file a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, and see exactly what you submitted. So the flip side of this is smart contractors are already using this to their advantage. You can review your competitors' past bids, and if you're not doing this, you're missing easy intel. But you have to remember that your own info is going to be out there too. So, most importantly, you need to make sure that you protect your confidential information. Typically, there's going to be language in the RFP that tells you how to notate, and call out specifically proprietary information, like your pricing, which is usually you have to add a disclaimer to the bottom of those pages. And they're going to get cranky if you mark every page as proprietary. So, you have to be choosy. One of our clients is working on a SLED proposal right now, and through the Q&A process, a competitor asked about the incumbent, which is our client, and the agency released our client's entire original proposal through an amendment. Every page, their pricing, their org charts, their resumes, their past performance, their win themes, like all the stuff that we put in proposals, and it's now all out in the open. So again, if you're going to start bidding in this market, you have to assume that your proposal can be published. So you have to be strategic with what you include, label the proprietary info properly, and don't put anything right in writing you wouldn't want a competitor to see, which is a tricky balance because you have to put enough in the proposal to convince the client to award you and to score high on the evaluation criteria. So it's a delicate balance, but it's just something to be aware of. All right, so in the federal world, contract vehicles are obviously a big deal, but they're centralized, they're standardized, they're well documented. But in SLED, of course, it's a different beast. There's no GSA, there's no one stop shop. Again, every city, county, and state agency can create its own version, whether it's called a bench contract, an MSA, an on call, a pre-qual, you name it. So you really have to keep an eye on these. Sometimes you have to be pre-qualified every year just to bid on opportunities, or you can only submit to be on the bench contract every 3 to 5 years. So again, do research into how your target agency buys through these types of vehicles and see what the process is to get on them. All right, so where you focus your efforts geographically is going to depend on where you're located and where you can really get involved locally. So I wanted to look at the geographic distribution of state and local solicitations from 2024 from, again, our partner HireGov. So while federal contracting activity, obviously, it usually clusters in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, SLED is going to be much more distributed nationwide, obviously. And there's going to be higher activity in certain states, like high population states like California, Texas, Florida, as well as states that have investment, by the government, such as Massachusetts and Michigan. So again, this is really interesting to dig into as part of your strategy to know where the money is, who's often buying at the SLED level, and just build that into your strategy. Cross-referenced, of course, where you have offices and people and presence. But if you don't know where to start, I think that these 5 states are ones worth watching. So California is where I live now. It's obviously a monster. They have a $300 billion plus budget, and they have contracts for everything under the sun, literally. Illinois is huge in infrastructure and transit. So think roads, rail, modernization efforts. Virginia is going to give you a mix of state buyers with federal crossover potential, which is interesting. So if you're already doing federal, that may be something to look at. New York is going to be a tech and infrastructure hub, but they're very complex. So New York and California, Florida and Texas are the 4 most difficult states, I think, to write proposals for because they have so many requirements, which I'll show you in a second. And they're very complex. And then, of course, my hometown, North Carolina, so I'm a little biased. They're quietly becoming a high growth player, though, with major healthcare and major R&D spend. So again, interesting to look at here as you build your strategy. And then I wanted to show you some real live RFPs that have been posted in the last month. These are in California. So obviously you can see the wide range of buyers. We have everything from a public library, the county level, a specific department in water and power level at the city level, a DOT, water district, a little bit of everything. And you can also see the range of all the services and products being offered or being sought after. And then you can see the timeline. I think it's interesting to look at. Whereas federal typically has a 30-day turn. Some state and local ones will have a 30-day turn from RFP release to proposal due date, but some are quicker. So just again, you got to be ready, you got to have your A game, and you got to be sales ready. So before you start chasing SLED contracts, you need to pause and ask yourself if you are SLED ready and what exactly does that entail. So let's break this down because assets do not mean a dusty pitch deck from 2018 or a federal proposal template in Times New Roman 12-point font. So in SLED, you're going to have a lot more room for personality, for creativity. So your material should really reflect that. Your pitch deck should be visual, punchy, focused on outcomes, not 40 slides of boring bullets. Please don't do that. Please don't do that at the federal level either. Your proposal template needs to be clean, modern, easy to skim. So think things like infographics, call out boxes, white space. Obviously, we want to do that in federal as well, but federal is often, it's hard to make Times New Roman 12-point font sexy. But again, you're going to have more room for creativity at the SLED level. And then your value prop, it better be more than we're responsive, we're client focused. Like everyone says that, who cares? What's your edge in this market? And again, think about your local impact, how you're involved in the local community, you're invested, you're not just flying in to win a project. You belong here. So let's walk through some actual examples so I can show you what I mean. So this was a proposal a couple years ago for a local airport. So you can see it's got a custom cover, it's got a photo of the airport, there's visual interest in the layout. The biggest piece of this proposal was telling a story about how the client was deeply ingrained in the local community, really invested in the airport's success. They didn't want just a huge, nationwide consultant. They wanted someone that was local, that flies in and out of this airport, that really cares about the success of the program. So we had to tell that story very strongly. Some proposals at the state and local level can be very complex. So this one was for an on-call contract with the LA Department of Water and Power. It was 3 volumes, almost 800 pages. 150 of those pages were forms alone, and there are 14 subs plus the prime. So 15 firms altogether. And it was a ton of effort to pull this together. The forms alone, this is the tracker that I had to build to keep myself organized with all 15 of the firms. Which forms were required for each of them, because it wasn't every form for every firm, and then the status of each as we went through the proposal process. So this is a critical effort. This cannot be underestimated. And forms in SLED are really interesting. So in this case, like each firm had to sign a form that the owners of the firm don't owe any back child support, and that they won't contract with firms or people located in Iran. So it's very interesting, these types of forms, but they're required, they're compliance nightmare. And sometimes with these really big complex proposals, there's a proposal manager and then there's a proposal coordinator that is literally just doing forms, because it is such a big effort. So again, something to think about as you build your strategy for SLED. On the flip side of that, sorry if I scared you, but they can also be very simple. So this is a proposal for like a city, I think in the Northeast. It was 35 pages. There were no forms, no subs. But the nuance here was that we had to write about our familiarity with the local region. And that was part of the evaluation criteria and scoring. So again, if you're not local, you're going to have a hard time writing that section. So think about that again as you build your strategy. All right, so SLED buyers are not going to be hiding. They're going to tell you exactly what they care about. You just have to find the information and do your homework. So you need to look up their strategic plans, their capital improvement programs. A lot of times they put out procurement forecasts. They have guides that are called doing business with whatever the agency is. These documents are going to be packed with gold. They're going to have priorities, pain points, who to contact, what's coming. So again, do your research. Don't just start responding to RFPs. And then get out there, because at the SLED level, relationships drive decisions so much more than federal. And there's going to be a variety of events to start getting involved and engaged, whether it's through the agencies specifically themselves, or organizations like the Supplier Development Council. There's one here in Southern California. There's a National Supplier Development Council. Also think about the local Apex Accelerator, which is obviously formerly known as the PTAC. They're going to host events as well. Like the one here in California is hosting doing business with San Diego Water Authority. So that's a great way to get in the door, meet the people, start showing your interest. And then in federal, orals interviews are becoming more and more common. But in SLED, they're a thing. They've always been a thing, and really, it's game on. So cities, counties, and schools are going to want to see your team present, not just read about them in the proposal. And no, this is not an optional piece of the process. So this means that as you're building your proposal, you need to think about who your project manager is, who your tech leads are, who your subject matter experts are, and make sure they're the right ones to be in the room, because they're the ones that are going to have to go show up and present that orals interview. And make sure that your team has rehearsed. Otherwise you're going to be handing that win to someone else, because this is where you're really going to close the deal. So this is a big piece of SLED. All right, so one final reality check for you as we close up here. One of our clients recently submitted a proposal to a state university that got over 120 responses. 120. Like, I haven't seen those numbers in a long time. And that was before the new administration was even voted in and all this federal chaos started. This was like at the end of last year at some point, or I think in the fall. So federal contractors, obviously I'm doing this webinar to help federal contractors pivot into SLED, which means there's going to be more and more competition at the state and local level. So you better have a game plan. You better figure out a way to stand out, and you better have a strategy. Of course, if you need help, you can call in the experts. And oh, by the way, that's us. So here's how we help. So whether you're just entering SLED or trying to scale, we really plug in where you need us. So we'll help you, plan smart with a BD strategy, market insights, capture planning, account planning. We're going to make sure that you stand out from your brand to your website to your proposals. Your website cannot just look all federal. It needs to then break it down into community level too, at the local level. So that's a delicate balance too, because you don't want to alienate your federal buyers, but you want to look local to local buyers. So that's how we help as well. We can help you obviously win more business with killer proposal support, process improvements, because your pursuit process needs to be super quick for SLED. You can't rely on Shipley process. And then obviously interview coaching, since that's a big piece of the process. And then we're going to train your team too. So they're not just winging it, they're selling and positioning like pros. So we don't do fluff, we do what moves the needle, and we help with what brings the most impact to our clients. So up next is our next Basecamp briefings, which is going to be on April 21st. And we're going to talk about GSA and the multiple award schedule, the MAS. So this QR code, if you open your camera on your phone and scan that, that's going to take you straight to the LinkedIn event so that you can register directly for that. So I'll let you do that really quickly. Open your camera there, scan that QR code so you can register. We'll obviously send out emails and notifications as well, but we're super excited to talk about this as procurement gets centralized in GSA. And then we'd love to hear from you. So if there's other topics that we should consider or dive into next, feel free to reach out. I've got my email information there, my LinkedIn. And then if you're interested in chatting about your SLED strategy and how we can help, or just bounce some ideas off in a quick meeting, you can use that QR code there to scan and book directly on my calendar. So I appreciate everyone joining today. It's been a fun time talking about SLED, and I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks at our GSA MAS Basecamp briefing. So thank you.